Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Recreation and Parks Commission. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Jackie, roll call, please.
Commissioner Watson,
Present.
Commissioner Stolnick,
Present.
Commissioner Loobs,
Present.
Vice Chair Davis,
Present.
and Chairperson Moda.
I'm here. Thank you. Presentations tonight? I see none. Thank you. Public communications related to commission business only. Seeing none, we'll close public communications. Consent calendar, approval of the minutes of the Recreation and Parks Commission regular meeting of January 15th, 2020. Anyone?
I move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
5-0. There's no unfinished business tonight, and we have new business. Review and approve the proposed criteria for success relating to the Youth Aquatics Club providing service at the City of El Segundo. Weisburn School District Aquatic Center for the purposes of clearly defining expectations for current and future aquatics program providers. That's a long sentence. Recommendation, review the proposed recommendation and provide direction or feedback, or two, alternatively discuss and take other action related to this, to each item. Meredith.
Yes, thank you very much. Good evening, Commissioners. This item is in front of you today. The majority of the presentation will be coming from Recreation Superintendent Ericia Hester, our Aquatic Supervisor, Janine Haushen, and then hopefully some participation from our subcommittee members, Lee Davis and Kelly Watson, who've been involved in the process working with staff. But essentially what's in front of you tonight is an overview of what's been developed internally for policies and how to measure success of the primary user groups over at the Aquatic Center. We've been open at the Aquatic Center just over a year, and the 4 primary youth club teams, 2 water polo teams, and 2 swimming teams have been in the water about a year now. 2 of them started in March and 2 of them started in April. And at the time of allocating those space agreements with those groups, the City Council indicated that they wanted the staff to come up with a measure of success to make sure that those programs were aligned with our overall vision for the facility and for the aquatics program as a whole. So we've had a lot of internal conversation about it, as well as collaborating with the different groups and getting their feedback, making adjustments. And so at this point, I would turn it over to Ericia, and they will go through the presentation, and feel free to ask questions. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for having us this evening. You have the staff report in front of you, but we are going to go through a short presentation. This allows time for any questions that you may have. Also, if there's anything that you think we should be looking at closely, anything we should amend, this would be a good time to say it, but we would like to move it forward to Council, so hopefully this is pleasing to everyone involved. So I'll move forward with our presentation. So a brief background. A lot of this will be going over what Meredith just told you, so bear with me as we move through it. But in 2019, the City Council approved groups to be in the water to rent space from us. We had 4 youth groups, and they were Alpha Swim, Beach Cities, South Bay, and Trojan Water Polo. They had some simple parameters. The 4 groups had to share space. They had to offer great programs to the community. And we had to look at their programming over a year's time and look at them and measure their success in some way. We had to come up with some criteria, but there was a problem. There was an unknown, and that was the success criteria. So after this, looking at what we had to come up with, there were different meetings. As Meredith said earlier, we had to come up with some ideas. And of course, I'm trying to keep you entertained because you're hearing this information so much. But the first meeting started off with just staff. Then we spoke to the youth groups. We brought the aquatics subcommittee in, and now we actually had a meeting as a team to talk over the things we were thinking about. And this is what we came up with. So the criteria will actually be in a Part 1 and Part 2 format. Part 1 is an annual self-assessment, and we'll go deeper into this between myself and Janine to pretty much go through this. And you can stop us at any time and ask questions. You don't have to wait until the end, so we can explain if you have any questions while we're going through things. Part 2 was the adherence to facility procedures and guidelines, community benefit, being financially responsible, and adherence to requested times and dates, lane and space utilization, resident participation, and of course the last part of that is the quarterly report. I'll start with going through the self-assessment and then let Janine go through the other Part 2 of the format. We will work from a universal template, and as you can see, it says work in progress. We have the template done, but we have not been able to sit down with the groups. We will do that in March so that they can have their input too on the template as well. Since they're doing a self-assessment, we would like to give them an opportunity to give input on the tool that will be used. It will be a self-scoring point system, and groups will have an opportunity to rate their organization. And then we will look at those ratings to see how we feel they fared throughout that time. They'll be looking at nonprofit status, whether it's in good standing or not. Required documentation. This is an expectation. All swim groups should have insurance. Outstanding partnership. We want to make sure that they're getting along with not only the staff, but other people that are participating and using the pool space as well. Fiscal responsibility, meaning that they're paying their portion on time. We want to make sure that the invoices are being paid on time and they're being responsible with that. Space utilization, we talked about that earlier. Janine will talk about it more, but we want to make sure that the space that they decided to rent out, they're actually using. It's not still water. Still water is never a good thing. That's what we say in aquatics. Organizations El Segundo resident participation is appropriate, and we will talk about that a little bit more later. Organization has documented measurable success. Are they winning competitions? Where are they placing in these competitions? Are they working toward maybe doing something as far as a training? Maybe there's a new class. Maybe there's we have an adaptive swimming group. Organization provides programs for community benefit. Organization has maintained a high customer satisfaction rating. We're hoping that the groups can come up with some way of measuring whether their participants are satisfied. Maybe it's a survey that we can have access to. Coach certification level. There's different levels for coaches to be certified. They can go and get additional certifications. We will take that into consideration as well. The organization submits their self-assessment on time, and the quarterly reports and advertisements have been submitted on time. So those are the things we will be looking at in a nutshell. And the self-assessment will be conducted annually. Adherence to facility procedures. So I'll let Janine take over from here, and she will go into a little bit deeper.
All right. So for part 2, we're looking at several categories and what we would define as success. In adherence to rental terms and conditions, we would hope that groups would ensure that their coaches and their participants and their spectators act responsibly and follow facility rules at all times that they're in the facility. We hope they remain in good standing, ensure again that their insurance requirements and documents are met. They keep up their nonprofit status paperwork, they keep it on file and up to date. And the big ones are they foster positive relations with staff, fellow patrons, and they assist in maintaining a clean and orderly environment at the aquatic center. And what we would define as success in that section would be adherence to the rental terms and conditions as mentioned within their contract. And then there is something in place where we can rank the teams. We're calling it a 3-chance rule, although that name may change as this progresses. So that would be the adherence to facility procedures and guidelines. The next one would be community benefits. This could include anything that a group may offer to the community, including community scholarships, fundraising events, collaborative efforts between the groups to provide a service like a clinic, or groups collaborating with the school district to start something like a Learn to Swim program. It could also be starting an adaptive program. And we're looking at a 2-part on that because we realize that starting a program takes a little more involvement and commitment than just an event. So we're looking at working out a rubric for that. That would be your community benefit. And then success in that area would be, again, providing these type of events and collaborating on them and how many they provide, how successful they are, and how inclusive they are. And then going on is financially responsible and adherence to requested times and dates. This would be ensuring, again, that their payments are made on time. Any lane cancellations are made within a timely manner. If they don't need their lanes and they recognize that, they give us a 2-week window to cancel their time. A lot of times groups will just decide to call a practice and they may cancel the day before. We're looking for a little more from them and that they give the proper notice. Success in this area would be defined as completing all their payments on time and ensuring that the times and dates that they requested are actually used. They don't come back later and say, oh, well, we did request 4 hours, but we actually only used 3. And then you go into the lane and the space utilization. And this is, again, so that we don't have people renting lanes just to hold the space for that day when their group may grow. We would define it as having their lanes filled with at least 2 swimmers per lane during short course and 3 swimmers per lane if they're renting long course. And for water polo, it would be an equivalent across the lanes. And then you get into resident participation. So resident participation will be defined as 20% or more of their active participation. So that's who's walking through the door, not just who's on their roster, but who's actually walking through their door each day. And we're giving them a little bit of time to build it up. So we're looking for success would be defined as 20% active resident participation by August of 2021. And it'll be something that we can review. This will be done through a Civic Rec tracking system, most likely, where each team participant will have a membership that will have their address. It'll be attached to their address and where they live. And each time they walk through the door, they'll scan in. So we'll have an exact accounting of who's resident, who's non-resident, and who's coming through the doors. We'll give them an evaluation in June just to let them know where they stand prior to that August reporting date. There's any sections for that.
And the last part of the success criteria would include a quarterly report. And we thought this was a good idea, especially with the new city manager coming in and Meredith pretty much informing us that he wanted some positive information in the beginning of the council meeting. So this would allow teams to not only give us a snapshot of what they're doing every quarter, but we could also share that information to city staff, city council, city manager to let them know that this is where this team is, this is what they've done this year, and we thought it would be a good thing for not only the teams but for the community to hear what they're doing over at the swim center. This is a tool that's also, you see it's work in progress, it's done, but I want to just have it approved by the groups or let them have their input before I actually say this is a final piece.
Darcy, does that quarterly report encompass the 5 other components, or is that separate from those 5 components?
It's separate. So it keeps us updated as to what they're doing. We're possibly, if their residency has grown, we would like to know that information on an ongoing basis. Maybe they have some swimmers going off to college and now they're getting scholarships, and we want to know that too. So anything they can give us on a quarterly report that's positive or that they need help on, maybe they need help with a program, that's a good time to let us know.
But both the criteria for success, I'm sorry, both part 1 and part 2, the self-evaluation as well as part 2, are both annual. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, correct. Implementation. Now, these are just target dates. We're hoping to start implementing this in April of 2020, but we can work with those dates. With the first quarterly report being due in April of 2020, but again, we can work with those dates. Our desire is to amend their contracts, because this first year has been pretty much a touch and go, trying to figure out how all of these teams were going to work together in the facility. So getting them comfortable and working as a full team on different teams was a challenge, but now they're there in a successful place. So we think this is a good time to give us a full year review by going ahead and amending their contracts to where we can look back at the full year and see what their success is now, that they feel comfortable and they're in place and pretty much being successful in the aquatics programs that they're serving right now. And like I said, it gives us ample time to do a full year review. What does this do for the city of El Segundo? Well, it provides the city of El Segundo with benchmarks for groups that rent or are desiring to rent to our facilities. So now we'll have something to give other new groups that are coming in. This is what we expect of you if you want to operate here in the city of El Segundo. We don't really have that in place now. So with putting these benchmarks in place, that at least lets people know what our expectations are. It shows the residents that the city of El Segundo has expectations and that we care about their facilities. It gives staff members and groups clarity so that they understand what the expectations are. It provides consistent annual goals for groups to continue to work on and build upon. As we were saying, we're not trying to pit the teams against each other. We're trying to get them to work to where they can become successful with their own organization, not to be in competition with one another. So all of these goals are just for them to measure their own success. It gives present and future groups consistent guidelines. It describes the performance standard expected in order to be considered as a successful partner with the city of El Segundo. Questions?
Anything?
Yeah, so I'm obviously familiar with the micro details of this. But there's the success guidelines, and then there's the self-assessment. Are you grading both of those? Meaning they provide the self-assessment, and then you go back and see, well, wait a minute, they're saying that they paid on time, but we have 3 late invoices. Is that why there's sort of 2 sets?
Correct.
Running side by side? Okay. And then I remember we talked about this, but I can't remember what we agreed upon, but success is defined as meeting the criteria. So what if they're late once? What does that do? Did we assign points to different levels? Is that what we ended up with?
We did.
Yeah.
We
okay.
did assign points. I just didn't want to present that as a final document because the groups haven't had a chance to look at it.
No, fair enough, fair enough. So there are grades of it, though, is the point, that it's not sort of an all or nothing thing. And like you mentioned, the 3 strikes, which may or may not be 3, maybe 5, maybe, just merely this is your ranking. You know, other people had fewer strikes, so therefore. So if and I guess I wanted to bring that up because if a child runs across the pool deck, that, and we've said no running, that doesn't mean that they're now, they failed that category. There's grades of it. If there's persistent infringement of policy, then that is something measurable. And the idea was to quantify as much as possible so that it didn't become sort of up to the whim of whoever was on the deck or whoever was grading this at the end of the year. We wanted to make sure that it was as tangible and as fair as possible to the groups, that they could come back and say, yes, I did have some control over whether or not my grade was here.
Yeah, and to further elaborate, it's not so much the running on the pool deck because kids run on the pool deck.
Right.
It's more like if a coach is allowing their swimmers to stay in the pool for 10 minutes into the time of another person who's renting that, so now that you have it. So there are much more substantial issues that we would be looking at for that. And, you know, the kid running or diving in the shallow end, which, you know, you hate to see because they can get injured, but that's one of the things that, you know, now if it's a kid that does it every day and the coach doesn't do anything to stop it, that's something. But, and then I'd like to also go back to the, where they're actually doing the self-assessment. A lot of times we can ask 1,000 questions, but we may not ask a question that would bring out an answer that, you know, and the one that pops to my head is, you know, we're not going to necessarily ask, do you have an Olympian on your team this year? In one case, there's a team that has a kid in Olympic trials this year. So we don't necessarily have to ask that one question, but in the self-assessment, you're going to get that, I'm sure, where they could sit there and they could boast a little bit about things that we may not be asking specific questions to. And I think that was more the onset of the self-assessment, is to let us know something about your team that we may not have asked or may not come out in the, you know, the paperwork.
I had something, so the residency verification is going to come via the city and not the individual teams, correct?
Correct. We were trying that at first, but we weren't sure. Sometimes you never know about the addresses and whether they're exact or not. So it would be more thorough if we have a scanning system in place where they're actually being scanned by the city as they enter the facility.
So, because I know we've had this before in Little League and things like that, where somebody said, oh yeah, they live in the city, and nobody really verifies the address, and I'm like, are they living in that building over in Smoky Hollow? You know, so is, you know, that's what I'm wondering, are things like that going to be checked out? Because that does happen.
Right. We're hoping the scanning system will give us more of a real number of participants that are coming out of El Segundo, rather than just having them write an address and then us believing it, so.
And we go through the same process that they do when they get their rec ID. They have to show a verification that they live within the city bounds, which is either a utility bill or an ID, two forms.
And that serves two processes. One, everyone who's going to swim and they want their swim team to get validation for that resident being on their team. It also gets more people signing up for the rec park card and puts more onus on us to actually check it like we would every other rec park card. So it does help the Department of Parks and Rec, as well as shows, you know, ownership for those kids and hopefully accountability to where they do live.
If I could add one thing to that too.
Sure.
We had some discussion about, you know, a swim team's roster that might have 300 or 400 swimmers or athletes on it. There is some difference with where those swimmers actually train. And so this is also a mechanism to make sure that El Segundo residents are training close to home here in El Segundo versus they may have 20% El Segundo residents on the roster. But this keeps them close to home rather than them, you know, driving out somewhere else to actually be training. So that was a concern as well. And so by only tracking those that are coming in and out of the aquatic center gives us a better snapshot of those El Segundo residents that are training here at this facility.
So a lot of these are kind of similar questions, but just so I understand it, the documents that you want the clubs to see, are those going to come back to us before they go somewhere else? So we're still going to have a chance to look at the rubric and the numbers and all those things?
Yes, I would like to return those back to
Okay,
this group.
cool. And so do you envision that rubric having some sort of, or maybe you've already gotten there, does it have like a final score or a final grade?
It does, but I
Okay.
don't, thinking of the points off the top of my head, I don't know what that final score is.
And is it two different scores, one for the self-assessment and one for the second, I don't know what you call the 5 things. Is there a name for the 5 things?
No.
Okay. Is it two
It's
different
just
grades?
the-
Is it a
the
self-assessment
criteria.
grade, self-assessment grade, and then the success criteria as 2 different things, or are they combined into one?
We haven't completely thought that part
Okay.
out yet, but we will.
And then I'm guessing that since this is the first year of this, it would take a while to flesh this all out completely, but I think that in the end, this would mean that a group could lose their opportunity to be at the pool. That's the end result of not having success. Right?
That's not the goal.
Right, but that's a
But
potential
it's
outcome.
the possibility, yes.
And if that has a chance of happening, I mean, have you gotten to the point where how many strikes there are or what it takes, or that's still being fleshed out?
That's being fleshed
Okay.
out.
And just curiously, do you consistently over the past year, have you had other groups still knocking on the door wanting to get in?
I don't know, Janine, we've had some private groups, but,
Some private groups, and we've had some,
but I don't know about teams.
youth swim teams more for a limited term, like while their home pool is closed down, not any looking for permanent residents.
And the reason I ask that is because it'd be silly to go through this, have to kick out a team because they're not meeting it, and then there's no one to fill the space, and then there's more dead water. So that's an interesting balance, I'm sure, that you guys are thinking about. This is kind of off topic, but I'm sorry, and it kind of dovetails into what I was just talking about. How do we know if the prices we're charging continue to be appropriate for these teams?
Our next report, Meredith, we're pulling numbers right now to look further into the financials for the aquatic center, so we don't have an answer for that right now, but I'm sure we will come to some conclusion as we look closer at the numbers for the last year.
Because the harder we push to them, I mean, there's like all these different inputs, right? Where we want them to stay, we want them to be successful, but we also, you guys are charged with trying to get back as much money as possible. But if we charge too much, then they won't want to stay. It's
Correct.
kind of an interesting thing you guys have to fight through, okay? If teams cancel the lanes, that 2-week rule, do they still have to pay for the lanes? Because aren't they paying monthly?
Yes, if they're after the 2-week rule, we still,
If they cancel, like, prior to the 2-week window, they'll get a refund, but if they cancel after that 2-week window, then they still are charged for the lanes.
And if they aren't, how, does it happen a lot? Is this something that,
I think in the beginning it was happening a lot, but now it's slowed down after we've been meeting on a regular basis with the groups and making it clear that that's not acceptable.
because I think that should be, maybe that's embedded in the lane and space utilization, because I would think that if a group, that should be one component of this, is if you're canceling too often, that should knock you on this thing. I don't know if that's in one of these
Yes.
areas?
It is
Okay.
part of
Okay.
the grading.
Number of cancellations.
Yes.
Cool, that's all my questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Meredith, or Arcia, what are we looking for from us here? Agreement with what you've shown us so far, and is there a timeline on when we're going to see a finished document?
We meet I believe the first week of March for them to look at the document. If it's okay with Meredith, I'm okay with emailing the finished document after they've gone through it and made some minor changes.
Is that realistic?
To go,
March 1?
the first week of
Or-
March, yeah.
You're laughing. Talk to me.
It's been 4 or 5 months in the coming, so,
Well,
I mean,
I
is it
wanna-
realistic?
yeah.
Yes. Is it going to happen? Maybe. And I hate to say it that way, but it has been a bit of time. So,
Okay.
I would rather do it right and take a little longer as opposed to that. So, when you say, is it realistic? Yes, but I would rather see it done right. So if it takes a little longer, which I'm not necessarily for, but yeah.
It's
So-
exactly why I'm asking the question. If it needs to take a little longer to do it right, then let's do it right.
Yeah, I think that, it's really going to depend on their feedback, on the group's feedback. I think.
Absolutely. So if
It sounds to me that the commission is generally in support of what's been presented so far, and we'll review the feedback, the questions, and see if we need to make any adjustments from tonight. And then the groups will meet that first week of March. We can definitely, at the March meeting, have an update for you, one way or another, whether it's finished or we need more time. We are planning to go to city council late March. If that needs to get pushed to April, that may happen, but with an overall one-year assessment and one-year review of the aquatic center, and this would be folded into that financial review as well. Because obviously the city council requested this, so we will be back in front of city council to let them know what we've come up with and hopefully get their blessing as well. But, so tonight, if you'd rather see the final document with the rubrics and the scoring mechanisms before you approve it, so to speak, then we'll make sure to put it on the March agenda to do that.
My opinion is, this is great, what I see so far, but I don't really want to approve a half of a document.
Okay,
That's my opinion.
sure.
So,
And tonight's recommended action was just to review it and provide
Right.
direction and feedback, and so the goal would be to come back in March with that final product.
sounds great to me.
With that being said, the current teams, are their contracts coming due, or are they on a month-to-month? I think they had a 1 year with a month-to-month after. Is that what they're on currently?
So actually, the groups at the Aquatic Center are on a standard rental agreement, and that doesn't require city council approval to extend those necessarily. So we can extend those on a month-to-month basis administratively, with the goal of getting the blessing from the city council to continue as our recommendation for the next year and a few months. The only ones that require city council approval for extension are the two water polo clubs using the plunge, and it has to do with the rate that they're paying, that it's not on the adopted fee schedule. So those can be done fairly simply.
The main reason why I asked is that, for the timeliness purpose, we had started this trying to get it done by the first year because they were on a 1 year, and we wanted to do the evaluation. So with that being said, as long as they're good and, we're able to keep them going in business as usual while we do this, I think, take our time and do it right, and see that. It doesn't have any repercussions on the teams though, does it?
No.
Okay, good.
Are the two teams you mentioned, the plunge, the same two teams that are at the aquatic center?
The two water
okay.
polo
Yeah, it's
clubs,
the same
yeah.
too, it's
So
not-
it was an opportunity that we were able to carve out some time where they could have an earlier start time for the younger age groups.
Do we need a motion?
We don't need a motion
Okay,
tonight.
All right.
No, thank you.
then, thank you very much. Very informative, and a lot of hard work by all of you.
Thank you.
Thanks. We'll move to reports. Reports of subcommittees. Aquatic Subcommittee. Did we just do that?
That's pretty much it in a nutshell with aquatics.
Okay, thank you. Gateways Committee.
No shocker here, but we had more meetings. We always have a lot of meetings. And we had at the end of January, we had 2 days where many of us spent several hours here at City Hall and viewed the 4 artists that submitted their proposals for the Gateway. And they all came up with very different ideas and concepts for our gateway at Main and Imperial. And it was very interesting to hear their presentation and how they came about their proposed gateway or design for our city. And now we are moving on to the next step, and in hopes of combining 2 of the designs and seeing if that will work, if the 2 parties want to work together, and if we can pull that all together to combine 2 things that we liked. So we will be meeting again soon.
Julie, can you refresh my memory, or Meredith? Have all the funds been raised for this, or
No, I mean, we have a budget, but depending on how we progress and the way we go, we would be looking for more funds.
Well, I noticed in the Herald that one of the candidates for council mentioned that some of that art tax could go to the Gateway, and that's what I was like, wait, I thought, so that's legit. They still may be looking for, you might be looking for more money.
Did anyone have anything else to say? Christopher, did you have anything to add in there?
No, it's primarily what Julie said about the budget. It's been an issue since day one, really, and doing this combination or collaborative concept, it's going to need some more funding. It's simple as that.
Okay, thank you. And golf course subcommittee.
We did have a meeting scheduled. There was a lack of quorum, and it was canceled.
Okay. Meredith, did you want to throw anything in on the golf course subcommittee or about
Sure.
the golf course?
Yeah,
As
I
long
can
as we
definitely
got it on
provide an
here.
update at this point on the golf course. There was a meeting schedule, as Lee said, on February 5th, which did not occur. The next regularly scheduled meeting for the golf course subcommittee would be April, the first Wednesday in April, whatever that falls. And as far as by way of an update on the timing of the golf course and the Top Golf project, we still intend to provide at least a 45-day notice to Lane Donovan on the operations of the golf course, which would also then be basically a 45-day notice of closure of the Lakes facility in preparations for turning over the premises to Top Golf for construction. That notice has not yet been given, and so we're at least 45 days out. And I would anticipate that not occurring at least for the next couple of weeks. There's a few conditions that Top Golf is still working to meet. And until the city has a comfort level on those conditions being met, we will not be providing that notice. So at this point, it's looking about early April as the soonest that there could be a potential closure of the lakes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Transportation subcommittee, Kelly.
Yes, we met and we're moving the RFQ process forward for getting the consultant that's going to review our current transportation options and look at possibilities for the future. And we talked about doing our bike valet launch on Arbor Day or Earth Day, I think we were talking about. So that'll be exciting. We would do it at the farmer's market, right? Is that what we're probably, maybe? Or if there's an Arbor Day event. So the idea is, though, that we would have this get out on your bikes initiative and that we would be providing a bike valet. And we're working with some of the nonprofit groups in town to get volunteers for it. So that'll be exciting. And then I shouldn't talk about the SPOT program, shouldn't I? There are some other exciting things in the works as well that you'll be hearing about.
Okay, thank you. And now Youth Sports Council, that'd be Dave.
Yes, Youth Sports Council did meet a few weeks ago. The main topic is often the same, and that is making sure that the coaches don't go on the fields on the days when it rains and they're not supposed to. That's always a leading topic. There was one little slight hiccup that Christopher has probably already conveyed to Meredith, or Sean has, and that was a little bit of a disagreement in the bylaws with regard to if your sport drops below the residency level and you lose your voting rights, do you also lose your rights to being a first chooser of the times during your regular season? And rather than argue there and discuss it, it was kind of, we asked that Christopher and Meredith and Sean give us a ruling kind of on what that means, and so that's coming back. We may end up having a youth council meeting in the interim prior to the one that occurs in the fall to discuss this, possibly even within the next month or two, because it was enough of an issue for a couple of the groups that we thought that we might need to meet again, so that may be happening. Christopher, does that pretty much cover it?
Yes, that is.
Thank you. Okay, department staff reports. Aracia, Recreation Superintendent.
Yes, so we are gearing up for summer. We're trying to start hiring now. I know we have a number of new lifeguards coming on, so we're excited about that. We just had on Valentine's Day, that was that Saturday, correct? No. I'm losing my mind. We had the first Tiny Tot Tea for Valentine's Day. It's sold out. We had 110 participants, I believe, and they actually had to turn people away. It was so crowded. So we are talking about expanding that for next year. It was very popular, so we were happy about that. One thing we're not so happy about is that our lovely Janine Houchin is leaving us. Next Wednesday will be her last day. So we wish her good luck, and we will miss her dearly. So I just wanted to make sure Commission knew that Janine's worked hard with trying to go in there and figure it all out, and she's done a good job, and she's really helped the organization and the operation thus far. So she's been appreciated. Thank you. And that's all I have this evening.
Anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you.
I was just wondering, were any of you boys Tiny Tots growing up? I was a Tiny Tot. It was a great program.
Okay, Christopher Henson, Parks Maintenance Superintendent.
You have my report there. I'd just like to add that Washington Park is coming along very quickly. Meeting tomorrow out there with the contractor to go over the just kind of the final wrap-up of elements and so forth. And I'll take any questions.
Is there, what's the bylaw for, or is there something in our ordinances that if you're seeding grass and have it taped off, that we can fine people or something if they run out in the middle and play on it? Or what I saw and sent pictures to Meredith was these guys on electric bikes zooming all over your fenced off grass area, up and down the hills, like literally launching themselves over the side of the hills. And I'm thinking, dude, I'm thinking, dude.
Right, yeah, we just carry a big stick and yell a lot. That's
So, okay, so I guess it was really two questions. Number one, can electric bikes ride through the park? Because my understanding was that bikes, skateboards, everything else, that there is an ordinance about that. Am I wrong on that?
There's a park rule in the municipal code that prohibits motorized scooters and bikes from riding through the park.
There is?
Yes.
Okay, all right, because I was unsure and didn't see any signs and thought, but it makes sense. Should I say something?
That would definitely be a big no-no. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So, I mean, as far as enforcement, I mean, the best thing to do is to call our 2700 line at checkout, and we can send staff out to hopefully redirect that person. You know, there's always, police, but obviously it's not an emergency and it's a bit overkill. Usually when we ask somebody to stop doing something, they will. So it's really about just the promptness of reporting it so that we can have a staff person go out.
Great. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Department Director's Report, Meredith.
Yes. So an update on a couple of items at last night's city council meeting. There was a public hearing, no public comments about the Memory Row tree and bench fees that were recommended through this commission, and those were approved unanimously 4-0 by the city council, so those will become in effect immediately. As a recap, it would be $500, all inclusive to basically donate a tree. That includes the plaque, the tree, and the installation and the administration and any other materials needed. So $500 for a memorial tree and $1,400 for a memorial bench. And that process, the application process will be administered internally by our staff in the department. So we do have a number of folks who are waiting for the outcome, and so we'll be reaching back out to those pending applications and letting them know of the new fee and see if they want to move forward with that program.
Can you let us know just those people who are waiting, just curiously?
Sure.
If they think it's reasonable and if they paid or not?
Bet.
Curious to know.
The other item that I was presenting to City Council last night has kind of come up rather quickly on internal discussions with myself, the Public Works Director, and the City Manager's office. As you know, in our current budget, the City Council allocated $800,000 to the renovation of the Teen Center. And after some internal discussions about really, you know, what is the scope of that project? How far can $800,000 really go? Is that really needed? And, you know, and having conversations here with the commission and our prioritization exercises, knowing that there are a lot of other needs in the Parks and Rec facilities, what we proposed to City Council was to take a bit of a step back and actually hire a consultant or consulting team to help us conduct a needs assessment, particularly on the Teen Center property. That would include the building area, the skate park, and the basketball area as a Teen Center complex, but hopefully also incorporate perhaps the George E. Gordon Clubhouse in that, and maybe an inventory of all of the Parks and Recreation facilities, have some community engagement aspect to it so that we can better identify if that's the best use of those funds and really what the Teen Center is in need of. And so that will be coming in front of this commission to help through that process. There is an expectation that it will get done swiftly and expeditiously, so we will work to get that done and at least have something to report to the City Council during their strategic planning process. So I'm happy to take questions on that, because I know that that's a new idea at this point.
Strategic planning is June.
June, July.
I thought we did a lot of this already. And so, did City Council throw it back, or is this staff making the recommendation to step back?
It's staff making the recommendation, and the main reason is because there were $800,000 that were allocated, but there's no scope of work to go with that $800,000. So it's really trying to identify what to do with the $800,000.
The 800,000 was, I'm going to use the word earmarked for Teen Center, right? And now it sounds like it's going to come away from the Teen Center?
Not
That's what it
necessarily.
sounded like.
Not necessarily. I think the reality is that the Teen Center, as it is today, is not attractive to our youth. And so it's really assessing, is the Teen Center as a standalone building what the youth in the community really desire, or is there something else that they need? Is it better used, like we heard at Civic Day, everybody wants to enhance the skate park. Would it be better, you know, how do we move that money around? Does it go to the skate park? Does it go to the building itself? Because renovations to a building, $800,000 may not go that far. So it's really kind of defining what we want to do with the Teen Center, or what the community wants with the Teen Center.
Was there any money allocated to any other buildings, or was that the only one?
No, that
So
was the only
in
one.
doing this assessment, there is the risk or the possibility that the assessment could show like, oh my gosh, the clubhouse needs this more than any building. You got to put it all over here. It's always a possibility, or you don't think so?
I think there's a possibility that the study could say that it's better utilized, that it could serve more people in this way or in this manner, or I guess that's a possibility, sure.
March, April, May. 3 months before strategic planning. You have your work cut out for you. And I hope we're not doing this work twice. Because I'm hoping that you're going to come back next meeting with something. Go ahead.
From what I'm hearing and from what I've seen within my profession, which was, county fire, anytime you have a project like this, you have to have a plan. I think what we're missing right here at the teen center, the clubhouse, the plunge, and just about everything on our list lacks our idea of a plan that has a specific parameter and a goal.
Right.
So in 3 months, I think it's going to be very difficult to draw public opinion. I think we all have an idea and we represent the public up here. I would love to sit down and hash it out and see what we could do, because that building, clubhouse, everything I mentioned is very important. And we lack plans for all these facilities. If we're going to be stating, if we're getting an $800,000 budget, we should be telling them how we're going to spend it. So that's something that we need to look at in the near future.
That's the precise intent of this process.
So I just want to catch up because I haven't been here very long, but I do recall sitting in on meetings. In fact, I remember going to a town hall meeting where we prioritized all these projects. And I'm confused too, because I feel like there was a plan, like, wasn't there a bunch of plans presented, and that's why the money that's why, first of all, there's a number, and second of all, it was the teen center, or was that a different process? I thought this was all part of the same process.
The process that you're referring to was in relation to the Los Angeles County sales tax measure, or Proposition M, Measure M, and that was to help on a county level identify needs across the county in order to successfully pass that measure for those dollars to come our way eventually. But it did definitely bring to light our community members' assessment of what they'd like to see in terms of improvement. The challenge that we have with this particular project is that everybody knows the teen center is suffering from deferred maintenance, and it's sort of a vicious cycle. Is it so unattractive that kids aren't coming, or kids aren't coming because they don't need it? So that's really what this process is to determine what is that plan, just like Lee stated, what is the plan with the $800,000? The $800,000 wasn't strategically defined. Through the budget process, it was just kind of throwing some dollars in a bucket and saying, here's $800,000, do something with it. But there's
that
no
didn't
clear
come from-
plan on what to do with the $800,000.
So that never came from the sales tax. There still could be a sales tax prioritization, or is that a different process?
It's a different process. It's a different process.
So
yeah.
where did this 800,000 come from, and who decided that it was for the teen center?
The city council during the budget process.
Was there a community advocate that put that bug in their ear, or were,
Well, we did have teen center pretty highly ranked.
I remember
So that was maybe a factor
Right.
that maybe influenced them. I think it was even pretty, it was like maybe top three
I think
possibly.
it
I don't
was
know.
too.
I feel like it was really high. That was part of it, maybe? I'd like to think we
I
had
think
two
it's
of
part of it. It's part of it. I think, though, when the department puts forth a project for the capital improvement planning project advisory committee to rank, we put in a form, and that was based on the outcome of this commission's
research.
discussions. And then those projects get ranked and recommended to city council. The $800,000 number was never attached from our side. And I think during their discussions, they just kind of threw a number at it.
So they didn't do a feasibility study on each of the buildings, like Public Works didn't say? will it
No,
work, I guess?
no. The only study that's been done is a conditions assessment study, and that's assessing the condition of the flooring, the ceiling, the electrical, the HVAC. What this does is it dives deeper into what should that space be utilized for? Should it be meeting rooms? Should it be an arcade? Should it be an expanded skate park? Do we really need a basketball court? It's those kinds of questions that will be asked, not specifically related to the condition of the facility. It's how to better utilize the space.
Right, well, and that was my question too, because you guys are asking about goals. Is there a metric for recreational facilities, like number of residents per square meter, or, you know, something like that, that is measured when they look at this type of thing to
Yeah.
decide how to allocate?
Yeah, there's general standards on, per every 1,000 resident, you should have X amount of basketball courts or X amount of swimming pools and things like that. So the
And-
consultant will be able to
And how
assess where we
modern
are
is
with
that? Meaning, you know, I've read some stuff about inclusion, and I think I shared this with you, that, you know, there's some talk that skate parks, for example, address mostly boys, and that youth, you know, it's not necessarily inclusive of all genders and whatever. But I'm wondering, like, how up to date are some of the stats, and are those the goals? Do we then buy in, you know, what goals are we buying into in that sense?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly what we're trying to assess with using a consultant who has benchmarks that we can benchmark against and is up to date on the trends and all of those standards.
Yeah, well, that sounds.
Okay, so we will see it back here
Yeah.
in the commission. Okay.
Yep, you'll be very closely in tune.
Okay.
Yeah, so just to put a bow on it for me, I think it sounds like we'll at least be able to give our collective opinion to council before that meeting in June.
Definitely. In fact, in terms of the community engagement, I agree with you. I think that this body acts as a representatives of the residents, and we're not looking to necessarily have, you know, a dozen town hall meetings or anything like that. I mean, we want to fine tune it, streamline this process, and use the commission for that reason.
Okay, thank you. Is there more from your report?
No, that is all for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner comments? Commissioner Watson?
Okay, first I wanted to congratulate you for the bullet about Raytheon and securing public use of their employee park. I think that's going to do a lot for some of what Dave was talking about in terms of groups arguing over field space, because there definitely needs to be more field space for the future of our grass sports. So congratulations, that's great. And
Yeah.
whatever cooperation the community needs to deliver to make sure that we are good citizens, I hope we can inspire our fellow citizens to participate wisely so that we can use that space for the future, because that's going to be great. So nice job.
Thanks.
Secondly, I wanted to share a study, because this is what I do. There's a study that was on Medical News today, and it talks about how green spaces in cities can help people live longer. And there's a stat that I thought was really interesting from this, and that is the stat that researchers found that for every 0.1 increment in vegetative score, which is a certain amount of green space per square foot, within 500 meters of a person's home, there was a 4% reduction in premature mortality. So there is a direct correlation between vegetation, having vegetation nearby, and living longer. So thought you'd all find that interesting.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Stolnick?
I just wanted to say thank you for listening when I had said do some social media posts on the park construction and park updates.
Yes.
And I think they've been very creative. They've been piquing interest, and there's been a lot of feedback on Facebook. Meredith actually sent me an email about, check it out, and I had already been checking it out. And just the photographs and the little taglines that are used, and I think it's piquing the interest of people. And so thank you for listening and doing that, because I think it's a good use of our social media. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lubes?
I really appreciate the amount of time that you all spend on these committees. I don't do that much, so I thank you so much for what you guys are all doing currently. And Bob, I know you've been on a million in the past, so thank you all very much for doing that. Congratulations on your new job, and thank you for your service to the city of El Segundo.
Okay, Vice Chairperson Davis.
I'm going to reiterate what was said about Raytheon. I think it's great. The more we can do to facilitate that, the more we get to throw on your table as far as probably maintaining it, which we truly do appreciate. Janine, thank you so much. Congratulations going back to Culver City. I'm really happy for you. I'm a little torn though, because I know that we're going into, I think, month 13 of the Aquatic Center, and we'll be going on our 3rd aquatic supervisor, a position which we created for that facility to help it grow. And I hope we don't take the hiring of the next person lightly. I've talked to Meredith about this, and not look for a person, but look for the person is really good. I know we'll have it in good hands for a while, but she can't get that lucky, trust me. But I think I see what's happening, and with that, I really, really have to stress getting the right person, figuring out where our successes and failures have been in the last 13 months, and seeing to it that we find the success criteria that we're talking about up here within our own ranks, and getting somebody who's going to, for lack of a better, stay and develop a program that's going to be adequate of that facility. It's $12 million, a hole in the ground, and that's all it is until we put something in it that's really, really fantastic, and hopefully we'll get that. So thank you.
Thank you. Janine, thank you. Thank you for your time, and good luck. With that, we'll go back to public communications. Seeing none, we'll close public communications, and we'll adjourn to the next regular meeting on Wednesday, March 18th, 2020 at 6 p.m. Thank you.